Hi, my name is Holly O'Donnell and I'm a conservation biologist, and I've been working in the Peruvian Amazon for the past 5 years. The Amazon rainforest is a beautiful place. It can be challenging to live and work there. It's not always easy, it's hot, there are a lot of mosquitoes, but I absolutely love it. Why? Because it's abundant with life everywhere you turn. It can be difficult to see some of the larger mammals, such as jaguars, tapir, giant anteaters, but they are there. We see monkeys every day, which is a lot of fun. And did you know that there are two species of wild dog that live in the Amazon? They're really rarely seen. But this just adds to the mystery and the excitement. You never know what you might see when you head out for a walk. And even after years of working there, there's a lot that I haven't seen. The area of the Peruvian Amazon where I work is in the same region as an area which has been declared the most biodiverse on Earth. That means there are more plants and animals there than anywhere else. It's a biologist's dream. Unfortunately, I am not just a biologist. I'm a conservation biologist because the Amazon is under threat. The Amazon is vitally important for the entire planet. It's important for you sitting at home in the US, and it's important for me sitting here in the Highlands of Scotland. It's important for the Arctic, the Antarctic, and even our oceans. Frighteningly, it is under serious threat, and this threat is increasing year on year. The Amazon may seem a faraway exotic place, but the effects of its loss will be felt on all of our doorsteps. I imagine that most of you know that the Amazon rainforest is being cut down at an alarming rate. Last year, our news broadcasts were full of images of the Brazilian Amazon on fire. The most common way to deforest in the Amazon is to first take out the big trees that are valuable as timber and then burn down the rest. This is bad for a number of reasons. Animals lose their home. Habitats are destroyed. Ancient trees and plants are lost. But it's worse than that. The action of burning a tree or burning vegetation is that colossal amounts of carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere, carbon that has been stored for millennia. As you know, too much carbon in our atmosphere is causing global warming. And if you think about it, you'll realise that not only are we releasing masses of carbon into the air, we are destroying the very thing that can cure it. How do you remove carbon from the atmosphere? With trees. Trees take in carbon dioxide from the air and from water, convert it into oxygen and release it back into the air. They use our waste, our carbon output that we expel in our daily lives as fuel to make food, and in turn purify our air. When people call the Amazon the lungs of the planet, they are not exaggerating. A big reason for why deforestation and the burning of forest occurs is agriculture. Slash and burn is a technique commonly seen in the Amazon. People burn the existing forest, so that the charcoal left behind fertilizes the soil. This helps them to grow crops. The soil in the Amazon is actually surprisingly low in nutrients. Nutrients only go about 1 metre deep. They're quickly used up when the forest on top is cleared. This means that the farmers have to expand their farm every few years when they can no longer grow crops. So more and more forest is cut down, which is what you can see in this photo that my friend Mohsen took. Often these fires get out of control. We see this in Peru every dry season, and it's what you saw in the news in Brazil last year. The fires spread and burn out of control for weeks on end. The other reason that forest is cut down and burned is to create cattle ranches, and it doesn't stop there. A lot of forest is also cut down to grow feed for cattle. The main one is soya. Much of this beef and soya is exported to the United States. Cattle themselves release large amounts of methane into the air. A colleague of mine is carrying out some really important research for her PhD, where she's created a farm in Peru and she experiments by growing different plants and trees in cattle pastures, native trees that the cows can eat rather than grasses, which are more generally used and they tend to not be native. Obviously, you can't all go and start a farm in Peru. So what can you do? Well, I urge you, if possible, and if it is within your budget, to consider looking into where your beef comes from and what it's fed. I don't know a lot about the beef industry in the US, but in Scotland, for example, most cows are grass-fed year-round rather than in soya, and I can go to a local butcher to buy beef from a cow raised locally rather than beef that's come from the Brazilian Amazon. You can reduce your meat consumption overall or replace beef with a more sustainable meat such as venison, or you could even consider becoming vegetarian. I'm sure all of you will have seen in the news last year those images of the burning Amazon on fire. but a threat that you will likely not be aware of is that of gold mining. The biggest shock to me when I moved to Peru was finding out that one of the biggest threats to the Peruvian Amazon is illegal gold mining. In fact, on my flight, I flew over a huge mine and I wondered what that sand dune area was. Even as a biologist, I had no idea. Gold mining is carried out in two different ways. One is by little rafts on the river. Miners float on the river and they suction up sediment from the riverbed. This disrupts the riverbed. Also, mercury is poured into the water so that the flakes of gold will join together in clumps, making it easier to separate it from the sediment. That mercury is then poured back into the rivers, and the lumps of gold are burned so that mercury is released into the air. The other method, which is what you can see in this photograph, is to clear cut forest and then pour with a hose huge amounts of water from the river into the ground. The watery sediment is then sieved, mercury is added, which again escapes back into the soil or into the rivers. This method leaves huge areas of land decimated, devoid of life, and contaminated with high levels of mercury. This causes huge problems for wildlife and people. Mercury accumulates in the food chain. It enters at the bottom, and as larger fish eat small fish and larger mammals such as otters eat fish, it accumulates. For many people, it is no longer safe to eat fish from the rivers. In town, where I work, for example, we are served farmed fish, which is ridiculous when we are surrounded by rivers and lakes. A study in Puerto Maldonado, the town where I work, found dangerously high levels of mercury in women's hair. In humans, it causes nerve damage, birth deformities, and affects the brain. These miners come into contact with mercury every day, breathing in the fumes as it is burned off and even mixing mercury by hand into the sediment. This is common practice in the region of Madre de Dios, where I work. In 2013, there was an estimated 30,000 illegal miners in the region. The city of Puerto Maldonado is full of shops which buy gold. Mining even occurs inside the Tambopata National Reserve. I have photos. In 2019, a paper found that almost 1,000 square kilometres of rainforest has been destroyed by illegal gold mining in Madre de Dios since 1985. However, the Marines are putting in a huge effort right now to tackle those mines. A state of emergency was declared in the region in 2019. I've personally seen boatloads of Marines going up and down the Tambopata River, and I've heard the explosions as they blow up these small rigs. But I've also met miners, and I know miners who are just trying to make a living for themselves. And when their rig is blown up, they'll just build another one. Mining now has increased massively because of the pandemic, as people turn to it to make a living. There's no tourism now. Mining is a dangerous business. It brings with it organised crime, human trafficking, child slavery, and the sex trade. When the military displaced over 5,000 people from a large mine called La Pampa in 2019, crime in Puerto Maldonado, the town where I work, escalated as out-of-work miners moved into town. They had no work. They mugged tourists and locals alike. A tour guide was even shot dead while preventing his tourists from being mugged. Closing down a mine is complicated. Alternative livelihoods are necessary for the people displaced. Otherwise, the problems continue, and now in the pandemic, people can go back to mining unchecked. Miners also have a lot of power in the area. During the wet season of 2015-2016, I lived through a mining strike. The government decided to put a restriction on the amount of gasoline that a person can buy in an attempt to limit illegal mining. It sounds like a good idea. However, what happened was that the miners took over the entire city. The markets and shops were closed. Restaurants, cafes were closed. Barricades, some of which were on fire, were set up on the roads. If you left your house on your motorbike, you were beaten up. Our staff in town were stuck in their houses. I was in the jungle with a group of people, some of whom missed their flights. We were on rations, down to eating plain pasta, because we couldn't have food deliveries. Eventually, the army started to escort tourists to the airport. Some of ours left during the night in a boat to avoid the roads. This went on for, I think, over 2 weeks. What can you do about this? It's a difficult one. It's easy to say, check where you buy your gold, but a lot of the big companies buy dirty gold. And actually, a lot of the time they might be buying it and they might not even know because the traceability is difficult. So I would say ask companies where they source their gold if you're planning to purchase. Show them that people care, show them that people are interested. And tell your friends, tell your families, Gold mining is a huge issue with very few people know about, myself included until I went there. I have since made it my mission to show as many people as possible a documentary called Amazon Gold, which I highly recommend if you can access it. Oh, and buy antique gold if you can. Mining, deforestation, fires, all of this contributes to biodiversity loss of life, lots of animals, lots of plants. And that in itself comes with other complications, other effects. Healthy rainforest is a balance. Many of the species which play an important role are endangered, such as the Peruvian black spider monkey, which relies on tall trees, such as the one in the photograph here. They're often the trees that are taken out first for timber. Species vulnerable to extinction, such as the tapir. Both of these are keystone species which play a much needed role in seed dispersal. Essentially, they eat fruit, they pass that around the forest, and trees grow. Peccary, which are a type of wild pig, they also keep the forest clear at ground level, which allows those seedlings to grow. Healthy forests are intact forests. There are many studies that look at how much deforestation or disruption a forest can stand before it loses functionality. It doesn't take a lot for declines in species to begin. When you remove some large trees, you cause the health of the forest closer to the ground to decline. Too much sunlight can reach the ground, and this allows the increased growth of shrubs, making the forest thick and difficult to navigate. Seedlings for trees are suffocated and cannot grow. I've seen this in degraded forest in Paraguay, Atlantic rainforest, and the differences were just startling. Edge effects are another problem. When you cut down one area, it also affects the bordering area. Jaguars, for example, can't roam into the open safely. Populations of species become isolated. Over time, they become inbred. They might even die out. This is called fragmentation. We, humans, also stand to lose. Aside from the ecosystem services that the rainforest supplies in regards to carbon, the Amazon is a source of many of our medicines. And of course, there are many more to be discovered. Reforestation is something which is growing in popularity. Tree planting, basically. I don't think it should be considered as a solution. It takes an unfathomable number of years for rainforests to grow into the complex, balanced environment that it is. Thousands, if not millions, of species need to find their home there so that all the functions of the rainforest can take place. Planting trees is sort of like putting a bandage on a wound. It's best not to have the wound in the first place. It's going to heal, but it's going to take time and you're going to be left with a scar. But the bandage is necessary. So yes, plant trees, but we mustn't lose focus on the most important goal, and that is saving intact rainforest, as much of it as possible. What solutions do I see? It can be a bit overwhelming, and it can seem like a lost cause at times. There needs to be big change on governmental level. I'd say until then, think about what you purchase and where it comes from. Push supermarkets and suppliers to boycott Brazilian beef and soya from the Amazon. Elect leaders with environmental interests. And tell people what you've learned in this class. If it interests you, read some more online or in the library, or contact me. What do I want the class to understand about what I do? I'm sorry if this talk has been a bit doom and gloom. I want to end it on a positive note. I love the Amazon rainforest. I can't get enough of it. It feels like home to me, and it is home for so many people. I just want to quickly mention that we should not forget about the Indigenous people who live in the rainforest, who rely on it to live. Many of whom want to protect the forest. They don't want their lands to be mined and deforested to meet consumer demand coming from overseas. John Hemming, whose books I strongly recommend, recently said in an interview that Indigenous people are custodians of a significant proportion of this richest terrestrial ecosystem. To paraphrase Winston Churchill, rarely have so many, the rest of humanity, owed so much to so few. Just again to highlight the magic of the rainforest, I want to quickly mention that there are hundreds of groups of people who live in voluntary isolation, people who have no contact with the outside world, which to me is just absolutely fascinating. I was so excited to learn about this when I first went out to Peru. Further up the river on which I spend most of my time working, a river called the Las Piedras, is a protected area. It's a territorial reserve for those people. And it's just about 30 miles north of the reserve where we work and where Tiffany spent some of her time. These uncontacted tribes have started to appear out of the forest. I've held a 2-meter arrow made by an uncontacted tribe. It's amazing. The Amazon is in many ways a timeless place. We walk among giant trees that have stood for over 1,000 years. We live close by to people who don't know the modern world. But the Amazon is also developing rapidly. I travel along a highway, brand new, to get to Las Piedras. There is Wi Fi now just 20 minutes from the reserve, where in 2015 we didn't even have a radio signal. I hope the balance can be met soon and not too late. And I do have hope that this can happen with the right amount of support from developed countries and a motivated government. We can't expect Peru, Brazil, and other countries containing Amazon rainforest to bear the cost of protecting the forest at the expense of their own economic development. It's a responsibility that needs to be shared globally. The Amazon is an incredible place. It is an exciting, magical place that deserves to be protected for its own intrinsic value. I'm going to show you a picture quickly just now. Apologies for the crude screen share. But yeah, I just love the Amazon. I can't get enough of it. No matter how hard it gets to live and work there, there's just every day or every few days something magical will happen, and it reminds you of why you were so lucky to be there. For me, the welcome home to the Amazon occurs when I'm on my way traveling there. So you travel along the highway and then you enter a dirt road, and there's a bird called a screaming piha, and it makes such a distinct sound. I'm not going to imitate it, but it's used in all the documentaries about the Amazon. And to me, as soon as I hear that sound, I'm like, I'm home, I'm back. It's the most exciting sound to hear. The other thing I love about the Amazon is waking up in the morning to the sound of howler monkeys calling. It's just, they sound like some sort of mysterious animal. If you didn't know it was a monkey, you'd never believe it was a monkey. And this photograph here is probably my favorite spot. It's a viewpoint over the Las Piedras River, and I'm looking up towards land that's been protected by a really great team of conservationists. And standing there or sitting there and watching the sunset is just it's a really grounding moment. It's you hear the sounds of the forest turn from daytime into night. So things like toucans and birds, they begin to be replaced by bats that you see flitting over the river. The sounds of frogs get so loud, deafeningly loud from the stream just below you there. It really is an incredible place. I hope you find this talk interesting. Please feel free to contact me if you'd like to chat about anything further. I want to end this talk by sharing with you my screen very quickly. This is a video that a friend took of me in the rainforest a number of years ago. Hopefully you can hear the sound, but this is the sound of howler monkeys calling in the trees. This is later in the morning, but when this happens at 4 a.m. in the dark, it's quite amazing. Thanks for listening.